Hey, I'm Hakim El Hattab. I am a front-end developer and co-founder of Slides.com and the creator of reveal.js. So I studied digital animation, which when I decided to study, I thought was going to teach me about Flash, which I was super interested in at the time from having seen Flash websites and what they could do at a time when HTML really wasn't possible to do those interactively, graphically rich things. So that's when I decided to pick a school based off of just wanting to learn Flash. But it turned out my school was more oriented towards animation in terms of video as a medium. So I ended up, and this sounds very counterintuitive, but I bought the ActionScript Bible. I can't remember if it was Bible or manual. It's a 2,000-page book, just a language definition for all the things that ActionScript can do in Flash. And I actually started, turning page by page and looking over all the properties, reading it like you would a novel, and understanding what the language was capable of. And then, to find a way to actually use that knowledge, I ended up building a lot of portfolio sites for myself, because you can't really get information to stick, I think, unless you put them into practice as well. I built like 6 or 7 of them in a year. So eventually that got me to a point where I knew enough and I was able to feel like I could do the basics of Flash at least. Google 20 Things I Learned About Browsers and the Web was a really eye-opening moment for me in terms of what HTML and JavaScript could do. And Google at the time was very heavily promoting, what HTML5 could do, and we're kind of spearheading, implementing those things at this specific time. And so they really wanted good demonstrations of what HTML could do. And then they got in touch with us because they'd seen some of my projects, and that led to building that at my employer at the time, so Fancy Interactive. And it was a really fun opportunity because Google allowed us to really just go wild, kind of try to use as much as possible from what HTML5 was introducing in one project. So we built this book that teaches you about the basics of how browsers and the web works. And we used, Canvas for like a page flip effect. So you flipped pages of the book graphically. And we used the history API to update the URL. We started using application cache to store parts of the book offline and make that available without having an internet connection, and many, many other things as well. People saw it and were impressed by, wow, so this is possible with HTML now. So it was really fun. So reveal.js, which is my personal HTML presentation framework, it's open source, is something that started because I was giving a tech talk at a small meetup in Stockholm, and at the time, you had to pay money for PowerPoint or Keynote. I didn't have either installed on my computer, and I decided, how hard could it be? You could build this with HTML, right? I've learned what HTML can do, and at the time what CSS could do as well, with transforms and transitions in particular. So I tried to build my own slides that I was going to present, and that's kind of how reveal.js was born, because the format that I came up with, which was very simple, it had this kind of 3D rotation of the slides, just drew a lot of attention. People got interested, and I released the source code, and it turned into a framework very organically from there that other people ended up using. When I start working on a more experimental project, because I'd like to put those in like a separate category, I work on a lot of graphical things that have almost no purpose except being visually interesting and pleasing, enjoyable and interactive. And when I work on something like that, I always try to start with a completely blank canvas. I have a very rough idea of what I want to do maybe. Many times I started out without an idea at all, and I just kind of sat down at the computer, and I think especially the HTML5 canvas element, which is what I really fell in love with, kind of afforded you to do that, because it is literally just a canvas that you can draw things on. You can put pixels on it. So you start by putting a pixel in the screen, and then you add a for loop around it, and now you're drawing 100 pixels, and then you maybe move them a pixel every time, and you start to see things moving. And I think when I see something happening on the screen like that, I start picturing different options for what it could do, and I change a variable, and that whole process is what really kind of inspires the ideas, I think. And I never really know exactly what I'm doing when I'm setting out to work on one of those projects. And I think that defeats the purpose, because it's a really visual play for me to sit down and just kind of build something. If I had a perfect idea of what I wanted to do from the start, I 100% think I would fail to do it. I think you make some of the best decisions when you're in the middle of the process, not when you're before the process and planning everything out, because you don't know what all the factors are going to be then. You make some of the more interesting decisions if you actually see the thing and can change it very quickly. I think it's really important to allow yourself to work on really meaningless things. I talk a lot about how useful it can be to work on things that don't really serve a purpose, because when you do, you allow yourself to use a completely different set of parameters, which can really free you and allow you to work in a very different way, which is creatively, and we're all creative. There's not like a brand of creative developer and non-creative developers. I think if you want to really get into, I think, the kind of things that I work on with experimenting with UI concepts and other types of visual programming, you have to really do it outside of work, because the parameters of work don't really allow for it unless, it depends on where you work, but if you're working in a medium to large company, it's very hard to find room for that. It's also very hard to get approval for working on those types of things. So it's been a lot easier for me to do it in my personal projects, and I think that's the best way to do it, because you don't set so many expectations for what it needs to be. You allow yourself to roam free and just build whatever it is that you want, and there's really no pressure if you're failing. If it doesn't end up being what you wanted to build, you don't have to have this kind of perfect plan for what you want to do and deliver on that. You can really go free and experiment. So I'm not saying, everybody has ample free time all the time to work on programming day and night, but it's really hard to do it within a work setting. Even though you can try and you're always going to be kind of limited about your pressure to deliver something, which really defeats that whole creative flow, because now you're feeling like it's not really a creative process anymore. It's just something that you need to deliver on and accomplish. When I build slides now, I allow myself a ton of time to really experiment with very niche parts of our UI that I've been annoyed by maybe in other places. So for example, I built this hover menu where you go over a button, the menu will appear, and when you cross from the button to the menu won't go away, because I draw a dynamic hit area for it. So when you cross that distance, the menu will remain visible. And I think that technique, I just started with the realization that I was frustrated by the current implementation that I had. And then I tried to challenge myself to find a better way to do it. And I always try to keep, that frame of questioning in whatever I'm working on, whatever I'm looking at. If I've implemented it, how could this work differently? Why does it work this way? Even for fundamental things. So I'll, build custom versions of components just to really learn how they work and what the factors are. And for a hover menu, even though I've seen a lot of them before, which have all worked poorly, doesn't mean that they couldn't work better. And after a while, you just start accepting things because of the way they are, and you forget to question them. So it's really, really hard to remember to keep questioning what you're doing and looking at it with fresh eyes. And it's really a superpower for the people who are able to do that. The thing I'm most proud about that I've worked on, I think, is the evolution of reveal.js to slides, which I'm working on today. Being able to work on a project that was initially only an open source project and turning that into a business which is profitable has been, something that just makes me immensely proud. I always wanted to start my own company. I was itching to do that. I was always imagining that I wanted to do that eventually. I never thought it would happen so organically, from working on something just for the fun of it, a passion project, reveal.js, it's just open source, and then gradually leading to something that actually pays my bills today and allows me to go back to kind of what I started working on in the very beginning and experimenting more and taking my time to work on the things that I really enjoy. I'm mostly, I think, excited about just the performance that we're getting now out of browsers. There are a lot of technologies that are exciting as well, but I think generally speaking, working on an application which is relatively complex and just seeing what is possible with JavaScript engines on every device today is super empowering. We built, a very complex presentation editor for slides that I worked on, and it was actually very trivial to get that whole thing to work on my phone as well. And that's just goes to show how thankful you can be for living at a time where we have these supercomputers in our pockets and everywhere. So I'm excited about not a specific technology. I'm excited about where hardware is today and how it feels essentially limitless in terms of what we can do already today. There's really nothing holding us back, and I think that's super exciting.